The editor pane of an APL64 programmer-developed function or variable may be floated or docked. When docked, the editor pane is contained within the Editors section of the main window of the APL64 developer version. When docked, an editor pane size is constrained by the overall size of the APL64 developer version window. When floated, the editor pane is independent of the main window of the APL64 developer version. A floating editor pane window may be dragged to any location on the workstation desktop. A floating editor pane window size is independent of the size of the main window of the APL64 developer version. An APL64 programmer-developed function or variable editor pane may be created using the Objects menu, the Objects toolbar buttons, or by executing statements like del myfn or edit del myfn. The syntax of an APL64 programmer-developed function may be included in the executable statement used to create a function editor. For example, del z left arrow l fn2r. When one or more editor panes are docked within the Editors section of the APL64 developer version main window, the available display area for the Editors section is controlled by a horizontal splitter bar. By default, the proportion of main window space is equalized between the Editors section and the History pane. Adjusting the location of the horizontal splitter bar will increase or reduce the distribution of space between the Editors section and the History pane. To float a docked editor pane, right-mouse, click the Editor pane's name tab and select the Float option. The Objects menu provides options to set the size and location of the floated editor pane. The location of a floating editor pane is determined by the user of the APL64 developer version instance. This location is independent of the location of the main window of the APL64 developer version. When all existing function or variable editors are floating, the editors area of the main window of the APL64 developer version is minimized. To dock a floating editor pane, right-mouse, click the Editor pane's option list in the upper right corner of the pane and select the Dock option. Alternatively, a floating editor pane may be docked by dragging and dropping it to the editors area of the main window of the APL64 developer version. When a floating editor pane is dragged over the editors area of the main window, position markers are displayed. Dropping the floating editor pane on one of the position markers docks the editor pane. All floating editor panes may be docked using the Object menu Dock Floating function and Variable Editor Panes option. The layout of multiple docked or floating editor panes is controlled by the user of the APL64 developer version instance. Some editor panes may be docked in the editors area of the main window of the APL64 developer version. Other editors may be floated independently of the main window. Use the Objects Editors pane Format menu item to select the layout of editor panes when they are created. Newly created editors docked in the main window of the APL64 developer version may be auto-hidden, cascaded, tiled horizontally, or tiled vertically when they are created. Newly created editors may be independently floated when they are created. When there are existing editor panes, Modifying the editor layout will reorganize the editors to the selected layout. When the editor's area cascaded layout is selected, existing editors are docked within the editor's area of the main window of the APL64 developer version. The editors are cascaded in the order that they were created. Click on an Editor Pane header tab to activate that editor. The number of visible Editor Pane header tabs depends on the user-selected size of the main window. Use the editors list in the upper right corner of the editor's area of the main window to select a docked editor. When the editor's area tiled horizontally format is selected, the existing editors are docked horizontally within the Editors section of the main window of the APL64 developer version. Depending on the user-determined size of the main window, there is a limit on the number of editors which may be tiled horizontally. The Objects menu provides the user-determined value. Maximum number of auto-hide or tiled editors option will apply. When the limit of horizontally tiled editors is exceeded, the cascaded editors area format applies. When the editor's area tiled vertically format is selected, the existing editors are docked vertically within the Editors section of the main window of the APL64 developer version. Depending on the user-determined size of the main window, there is a limit on the number of editors which may be tiled vertically. The Objects menu provides the user-determined value. Maximum number of auto-hide or tiled editors option will apply. When the limit of vertically tiled editors is exceeded, the cascaded editors area format applies. When the floated editors area format is selected, the existing editors are floated in a cascade. Each floating editor is positioned independently of the main window of the APL64 developer version. When the editor's area auto-hide format is selected, the existing editors are docked within the Editors section of the main window of the APL64 developer version. Each editor header tab is positioned on the edge of the editor's area. Activate an auto-tiled editor by clicking on its header tab. The Objects menu provides options for the edge to be used. The Objects menu provides a user-determined maximum number of auto-hidden editors. When the limit of auto-tiled editors is exceeded, the cascaded editors area format applies. Editor panes have their own toolbar buttons, so that whether they are docked or floated, the toolbar options are located within the editor pane. The toolbar buttons of a variable editor pane change with the variables data type, shape and depth. Click on an object name in the Recent Object Names list of the Objects menu to open an editor for the named object. To learn more about the function and variable editors in APL64, explore the Objects menu. Thank you for viewing this video. If you have questions or comments, please contact support@apl2000.com.